All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another video. My audio for this video is going to be worse than normal because I'm back home. Semester's over. Finals are done. Just relaxing before recruiting begins. So yeah, I don't have my mic. I'm on a laptop. In fact, it's very annoying trying to set up OBS to record audio on a Mac and also to record your mic. I had to use the software. It's super annoying, but I'm using my Mac as the microphone. It's not great. Hopefully it suffices, but it's temporary. So, but yeah, today I'm watching a podcast that Nick and Richard Spencer did that I think is pretty interesting because you'll see throughout this. I mean, it sounds like I'm lying, but they seem to basically acquiesce to the notion that liberals are just better. That we define the paradigm within which we exist, and that maybe we always will, and that conservatives are just too, dumb to do anything. And I'm slightly exaggerating, but you're going to say I'm not exaggerating much. I think that these are two pretty self-aware thinkers who find themselves on a side that lacks that level of awareness, and I just find it pretty interesting. That's why I react to Nick a lot. That, but also the videos do well. But other people do, like my Andrew Wilson videos do well too. It's just that I don't find him as interesting. So I think it's more fun to watch Nick and Richard as well, because there's this contrast between the level of intellect of their viewers and their level of intellect. So I think it's fun. But with that being said, I hope everyone had a Merry Christmas. I thought that it was very fun. I'm enjoying being home and done with the semester. A few things that I want to say. I'm thinking about making a video soon where, since I had some time, where I sort of outline my views on everything, liberalism, race, just all of it. And so if you have any questions for that you would want me to answer in the video, just let me know and I'll try to get to them in the video. I have a lot of people message me on Discord and Twitter, which those are in the comments, by the way, if you want to get my Discord or Twitter and ask me a question. And I can't always get back to them just because I'm pretty busy. But I'm thinking about maybe making a series where I also sort of respond to questions, just because it would be a good way to get videos out and to sort of espouse some of my views. Lastly, I may make a Discord, so keep your eye out for that and let me know if that's something you'd be interested in. I think that would be a good way to cultivate debates, because I don't know what's up. My debates keep falling through. I had a guy, Arthur Greenwood, he wanted to debate. He has like 10,000 subs. I thought it was going to be pretty interesting. He reached out to me, because his Discord bio says that he's an elitist and a eugenicist and all that stuff. He has a video that I was actually going to react to before he ever messaged me, called IQ is everything. And I think that notion is just very stupid. IQ is clearly not everything. And if it was, the right would be basically nothing, right? Because they have lower IQs than the left, as evidenced by basically every empirical inquiry into the subject. But yeah, I don't know. People like to reach out, say, let's debate, and then they don't do it. I guess they get a little bit scared, right? I mean, who can blame them? The formidable intellect of Veritable Crusader is just pretty intimidating. But that being said, let's get into the video. Let's see how it goes. And yeah, it's good to be making videos again. I'm gonna try to get out more over this break, though recruiting is going to be taking up some of my time. I want to be a little bit more consistent. I want to try to grow this platform a little bit, because there's a wave of right-wing nonsense storming the internet. And so I think anyone who's left or left adjacent they should be putting their views out, no matter how small their platform is, because we got to combat this stuff. But let's do it.
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. It's very festive. I just attended a lower school performance of Christmas carols, so there's really nothing better than kids singing about Santa Claus. But what are you up to for Christmas?
Oh, nothing. I'm just doing my show, and yeah, not any big plans. Just spending it with family. So
okay, that sounds a little sad. Are you?
Why is that sad?
Well, I mean, it's good to be with family. That's true, but surely there's some Christmas party that you're going to attend with eggnog and so on.
I don't think so. No, I didn't get invited to any of them. I didn't get invited.
Tucker didn't call you?
No, I didn't get the call. I wasn't. Yeah, you saw that. I wasn't there, and I can't go to America Fest, and I can't go to the New York Young Republican thing. So
right.
Yeah, I have no room at the inn. No room at the inn for little old me.
That really is how I feel. I don't want to be self-indulgent or make this about any sort of victimization. But that is how I've always felt with this movement of ours that claims to be nationalist and about conviviality and so on. And you sometimes feel a little shut out from these things. I don't know what it is exactly, but they sort of all hate you on some level. It's like it's not very convivial, but I'll move on from that. So we haven't spoken in around a year, and I wanted to just talk politics at the beginning, and then hopefully we can go on to some deeper issues. But some things that have changed. Obviously, this event of Charlie Kirk's assassination, there's actually a hearing today with Tyler Robinson. He's going on trial and so on, is, I would say, groundbreaking or transformative, but then maybe not in a way. So, I mean, this is a massive turn. There are things that are happening that otherwise wouldn't be. But just to give my, I guess, opinion before I ask you a question, I feel like the conservative movement has somehow blown the Charlie Kirk death in a way that is almost unbelievable. It was almost like a giant W was delivered to them on a silver platter, and they have fumbled it. And let me give a few reasons why they've done that. They're not really talking about political violence and the left so much as they're trying to sanctify Charlie Kirk, basically. So it all becomes some special thing about Charlie, that he was uniquely wonderful and that's why they killed him and so on. The Erica Kirk ongoing media tour is fine once, twice it becomes a little old, and on her 14th appearance crying, I find it unbearable and cringe and weird, to be honest. And I don't think I'm alone in that. I think everyone is reacting like that to it. When Charlie Kirk was killed, there was a lot of tough talk on the dissident right of, I heard this all over the place. We've got 2 weeks to crack down. We can destroy the left right now. They hate you. They want to kill you. They want you starving and blah, 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 blah. You heard all of that. And it does seem like he missed his moment. It's almost like...
Yeah, I mean, he's right. But this is something that happens time and time and time again. Conservatives are not very good at doing things, but they're very good at saying things. They're very vocal. And I think that vocality is something that a lot of people misunderstand. They take the sort of preponderance of conservative voices on the internet as evidence of where the country itself is at. So I want to make 2 points real quick. One, just on its face, the reason why conservatives are louder than their actions is because they're incompetent. They aren't able to actually do things because they're always facing institutions which are filled with people who disagree with them. Not because there's some conspiracy, but because conservatism itself requires either an inordinate level of self-interest that goes against what is actually good for the country or for our nation, or it requires an inordinate level of idiocy. The notion of conservatism at its heart is that we want to conserve things. We want to resist change. In order to even believe that that is possible, you have to be 2,000 years behind in terms of philosophy. We've known since ancient Greece itself that the only constant is change, that seeking stability amongst flux is just, it's not possible. And so conservatism at its core requires you to buy into the premise that things can be preserved, that we can resist change, that things can go back to the way they maybe once were, but really never actually were. And so conservatism itself is a good filter. It filters people down, and the only people who are left at the end are very self-interested people or very stupid people. And the self-interested people use this stupid people to make a lot of money and to make a lot of noise, but they're never able to actually do anything because they're facing a judiciary that is mostly, aside from the court itself, that is full of lawyers and judges who don't agree with them, who are more progressive, who do believe in more notions of social equality and stuff. And similarly, this is true for basically every other thing. This is the second point that I want to make, that the vocality, the noise of the political right is not evidence of the popularity of their views. When you go into these labs where scientists are, where people are, curing cancer, if you go into a doctor's office or if you go into a convention of lawyers, you will find that the vast majority of people there are either actually on the left or just liberals. You will not find people there who espouse the beliefs that the people do on the sort of online far right. And this being true means that there really is a sort of silent majority. And not only a silent majority, but a competent majority of people who don't agree with them and who oppose them. And so you will always have this phenomenon where conservatives are loud but ineffective. It's why Trump's first term didn't really do anything. It's why the second term won't really do anything. There's a lot of noise. There's a lot of edits of people, jumping out of helicopters and arresting immigrants. But if you look at the numbers, it's not enough. It's to accomplish their goals, they would have to deport far more people than are being deported, and they're not going to. And if you look at the deportations themselves, they're completely inefficient. They're basically random. They're not targeting criminals. Most people being deported are not even criminals. It is a completely incompetent administration. And the right wing, anytime they get power, continues to embarrass themselves. And it will always be that way. And so, yes, they blew the Charlie Kirk thing, just like they blow everything else.
Analogy that I might regret. It's almost like there was a Reichstag fire of sorts, and Hitler decided that he wanted to roast marshmallows as opposed to engaging the Enabling Act. What are some of your thoughts on this in terms of Charlie, what's happened with the right, the response, and all of that?
Yeah, I totally agree. I had the exact same feeling, and I've been thinking about that for the past couple of weeks. It's an extraordinary missed opportunity because, like you said, it's handed to us on a silver platter. Here's a liberal Democrat, goes to a free speech campus event, shoots the #1 guy, and instead of that being the narrative, which is crack down on the left, and it's not like that's unprecedented either. Obama did it, Biden did it. Whether it was January 6th or Sandy Hook, whenever there's a mass casualty event or a tragedy, they very effectively weaponize the bureaucracy. Whether they do the backdoor gun control or they get everybody with the DOJ, they always use it to expand liberal power, create a new agency, whatever. And there was a lot of tough talk like that from certain sections. Like Stephen Miller had a speech at the Charlie Kirk WrestleMania memorial, and he goes up and he goes, "You are nothing. You don't build anything." And he's talking to like the anarchists. And that's really what all of this is. It's all that and signifying nothing. The sound and fury signifying nothing. All the anger, the performative cruelty. We could just do things and you're going back. You've got 50 days. And it's just, you might as well have Mitt Romney as president. You might as well have Ron DeSantis. I mean, it's totally toothless. And I would say maybe to add on to that, it's interesting where it went instead, which is that was sort of like part one is the sanctification of Charlie Kirk and he ascended into heaven and everything. But part two is this Candace Owens. We have to talk about the psychosis and this sort of like QAnon on steroids. Like it went into a direction where it turned inwardly on itself. And I think this speaks to how the contradictions of MAGA are going to destabilize the right wing when Trump is gone. You're getting like a preview because the Trump movement is filled with contradictions and sort of unresolved conflict between like the base and the establishment or the donors. And he's been holding it together through the strength of his charisma and his personality. All the contradictions or compromises are washed away. These people just defer.
Yeah, Trump is very charismatic. That's the thing I think when I think of Trump is just a charismatic guy. Trump's appeal is based on just appealing to idiots. And that has always been the appeal of the right wing. Like I said, it's very self-interested people and very stupid people. And they're together in a room. And the self-interested people are just finding new ways to take advantage of the stupid people. It's always been this way. Going back to, the Southern strategy, wherein people said, hey, there are a lot of racist, backwards people. And we really want to capture their vote. This is what the right wing said. But at the same time, we don't want to sort of alienate and kick out the more, sophisticated people who don't find it very tasteful to just, be kind of a barbaric racist. And so they said, well, what can we do? Well, we can dog whistle. That way we get the stupid people and we get the slightly more cultivated but still self-interested right-wing people. And so it's always been about sort of catering to the lowest common denominator. And that's what Trump does. He's not charismatic. He is he's like a light for idiots. And they just are drawn towards it.
They kick it up to him. And that's really where Charlie Kirk derived his credibility. He was like a Trump sycophant, a Trump glazer, Trump ally, whatever. And with Charlie out of the picture and soon to be Trump out of the picture, it's like you're starting to see now that 2028 is on the horizon. There's like all this conflict about, is Erica Kirk an alien or is she a grieving widow? Is like, is J.D. Vance going to be with the Jews or is he going to be with the Groypers? So I think it's pointing towards.
One thing that's funny is if you're not like a right-wing moron, when you hear him speak, when you hear what he just said, those things both sound stupid. Are you with the Jews? Are you with the Groypers? Is she an alien? Or just listen to this. They both sound insane.
It's like, is J.D. Vance going to be with the Jews or is he going to be with the Groypers?
Jews or Groypers. And then
you're starting to see now that 2028 is on the horizon. There's like all this conflict about, is Erica Kirk an alien or is she a grieving widow? Is like, is J.D. Vance going to be with the Jews or is he going to be with the Groypers?
So it's obvious why the alien one is stupid because, we don't know about aliens and there's no reason to think that anyone is an alien. But the Jews and Groypers thing is just as dumb if you think about it. I mean, number one, the name like Groypers, I mean, who really believes that, inscribed on the Statue of Liberty, is going to be our, the normal message, and then something about groypers. Like that's just not a serious sounding thing. But then also the idea that like it's Jews versus groypers, that is how you explain the world. There's a bifurcation. You're either Jewish or you're a groyper. It's just stupid. It's naive, it's inane, and it's childish. And it's characteristic of just how schizophrenic the right wing is. You have a bunch of people talking about aliens and a bunch of people talking about Jews. It's funny, all of my videos, people say, there's another 7,000. You're a Jewish Israeli. And it's like, I'm making videos about Nick. I don't talk about Middle Eastern politics. I don't talk about Israel. I don't talk about the Jews. And frankly, I am from a small southern state originally. I moved for law school, but up until I came to law school, I had never seen a Jew in my life. Legitimately. I mean, they were that uncommon where I was from. I never thought about them. But the right wing is like obsessed with them. They legitimately believe that there's a Jew hiding around every corner just waiting to get them. That's why I usually respond like, is the Jew in the room with you right now? Are you insane? Do you need, medical assistance? I don't understand why everything is about Jews to these people. One of the things that I find funny, and I've said this before, but I'll say it again, you can't hold the position that whites are civilization builders, that they're strong and they lead the world and they gave the world everything that it has that's good, and they oppose everything that's bad. You can't hold that position and also hold the position that 2% of the American population and a fraction of the global population just have you in their grips, that they're controlling everything that you do, that they run all of your nations, and that they have, and everything that's bad that's happened in your nation has been caused by them, and it was done through subterfuge and deception, and it was done all under your nose. I mean, like, those two views are contradictory. I don't see how you can't see that. There are basically three options. One option is that you're right about the Jews and whites are just basically not that smart and they got controlled, and it'll always be that case. Maybe you are just, maybe it's the case that, like, just like you say, black lower outcomes are described by IQ, maybe white lower outcomes relative to the Jews are described by IQ, and that's just the way it is, and you should stop fighting reality. Maybe that's the case, or maybe it's the case that you're actually wrong. The Jews control literally everything. Or I think the third most likely possibility is that you're just stupid and wrong about both, and you are distracted by nonsense meant to divide the public so that people in power can continue to do whatever they want while you fight about nonsense.
I think it's pointing towards the right wing is going to devour itself, and you got chaos on the left, and now you're going to have total chaos on the right. 28 is going to be wide open. So that's sort of what I would add to it, is how it seems to be eating itself now.
I disagree. I don't think that there is nearly as much chaos on the right. On the left. The right is completely fractured right now. For example, I'm a liberal, and I'm pretty moderate in my politics, and I'm pretty unorthodox, and I have a bunch of idiosyncratic views. But I would stand right behind Mamdani. Even though I disagree with him, even though he's a populist, even though he believes in progressive politics that I don't believe in, like redistribution and all of that stuff, I would 100% choose Mamdani every day of the week as opposed to someone like Nick. Because I fundamentally believe that he is more representative of, values that I believe in and that I believe that America should stand for, which is the equality of peoples and the advancement of a nation towards a, safer and more open environment wherein, the economy can grow, people can thrive, we can, he is right that there is an affordability crisis and that we should figure out some way to address it. Maybe he's not correct in his method, but I would stand behind Mamdani. And I think that most people on the left would stand behind most people on the left. I don't think that's true for the right. I think there is a literal split on the right, and it is like an insurmountable barrier. The Ben Shapiro's of the world will never agree with the Nick Fuenteses of the world. So I think that he's wrong if he thinks that the right is, comparably divided with regard to the left.
Do you think there's something irresolvable about that? Because I remember seeing on Twitter the other day, they had like the top 10 podcast on Spotify or Apple or something like that. And you had Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson and maybe Ian Carroll, the psychopathic ski instructor that that is fascinating content. He's discovered the conspiracy behind Wendy's milkshakes and so on. I mean, the Zionists were involved. We knew that going in, but he laid it out. Anyway, I'll stop. But
I don't know how, it's funny, like their fans can't see that, like he's making fun of you right now. When he talks about how, the Zionists are involved in Wendy's milkshakes. It's because you guys see this stuff everywhere. You are clinically insane. I think that you could probably go to, a medical provider and get a diagnosis for some very, very unfortunate mental ailments because you are just susceptible to every conspiracy in the world. The fact that Candace Owens is popular when she says the nonsense she says speaks to the current state of the right. I mean, it's insane. And I think that these right-wing creators who do have, more than 3 or 4 brain cells, I think that they understand that they're not really on the side of competence.
So you have like Tucker, Candace, Ian Carroll, whatever. And you might have Call Me Daddy, but maybe. And that could be coded left, liberal, center, whatever. The rest of it are like the New York Times Daily Podcast, NPR, All Things Considered, the political gab fest or what. So what I see there is basically institutional liberalism and centrism. And then the right wing, which is schizoid nonsense all over the place. And we've also seen that graph of, right wing opinion. It's like dots here, dots there. And then left wing opinion is like a consensus circle. People say, oh, we're the free thinkers. Well, maybe, but it also might mean that you are more psychotic, more all over the place. You don't know what's up and down. You don't know why you agree with this person or why you might vote for him. What I'm getting at here is that there does seem to be an asymmetry between left and right in those ways. And there's also this way in which the right can't rule, and it never can rule because it's always the kids at the kids' table as opposed to the adults' table. It's always the people outside of the restaurant smoking a cigarette, theorizing about how the restaurant is secretly poisoning you, as opposed to the people in the restaurant and the customers and the waitstaff and the chef. You can't have Kash Patel as the FBI director, someone who declared that he wanted to destroy the FBI and make it into a museum. The outsider can't be the insider. And so it's almost like inevitably going to turn out this way, where in order to truly reflect and represent the base, you have conspiracy theorists in office. And
I think that he's hitting on something true, which is that the right-wing project is due to fail for reasons beyond the sort of deep contradictions of conservatism, which is, an attempt to preserve stability amongst instability, as I mentioned all of that earlier, but also the elite of our country are just more liberal. They don't care about, for example, like Nick does, their race. They just don't. And most competent thinkers really haven't. If you read Schopenhauer, he says that the cheapest kind of pride is national pride, and he's using nation in the sense of a people, a common ancestry. And the reason why it's the cheapest pride is because it's the pride of last resort. It's what you turn to when you're not a doctor or a lawyer or a scientist or an emperor, but you're just a man. And you don't really have a cool job. You don't have a cool hobby that you do. And so all you can say is, well, at least I'm white. And this guy who did this cool thing, he's also white. And so maybe I'm kind of like him. Maybe I can ride his coattails a little bit. And so because the elite don't buy into these ideas, and because our system was designed from the very beginning to be a system wherein the elite lead, wherein factions, wherein people cannot actually rise, Federalist Paper number 10, because of those two things, the right-wing project is basically always doomed to fail. And this is one of the reasons why I stopped kind of worrying about the ascendancy of people like Nick, or even, when people say Trump is going to turn us into a fascist nation. I promise you, neither of those things are going to happen. Nick will never be president, and we will never turn into a fascist nation without us becoming something else, without the United States basically failing. And the reason is very simple. Let's take Nick's movement as a sort of case study, as opposed to sort of dealing with it all at once. It's easier to talk about things and make them concrete and to get the point across. Nick believes in being pro-white. He believes in restoring a somewhat white America. He fluctuates between saying let's get back to 90%, let's bring European immigrants, and sometimes he says let's just stop immigration altogether from everywhere. So it's hard to know what he believes in, but one thing he does believe in is sort of bringing back a culture of whiteness and also being able to kind of be openly anti-black. Because that's Nick's show is really anti-woman and anti-black. If you watch Nick's show for long enough, you'll see that he is against two main groups mainly, three actually. He's against Jews, he's against women, and he's against blacks. And once you understand that, you can kind of predict every single thing that he's going to say. But the problem is, because that is his idea, he excludes black people, he excludes Jewish people, and he excludes women. And so his ideology is fundamentally constrained. it only allows for certain people to come in. And in its ideal form, it only allows for white men to come in. That right there will never succeed in a system wherein it is already so difficult for a normal political ideology to make real change. If you read Federalist Paper number 10, you understand that our system was devised from the very beginning to prevent factions from ever growing too large. Our founders were deeply, deeply skeptical and afraid of people. They were afraid of democracy. They were afraid of the infiltration of normal, non-property people into the government. They didn't want them making decisions. That's why we have an entire unelected branch of government. That's why one of the first and most important Supreme Court decisions established judicial review, which allowed for, basically a non-democratic check on any scope or any instance of democracy in our country. There's a pretty good book called The Law and Politics: A Progressive Critique of something. Something about that. Look it up, you'll find it. But in it, they talk about how, we have law, which has this sort of guise of objectivity that's bestowed upon it by the elite themselves. But it's not actually objective. For example, the distinction between the private and public domain and the restriction of the government with regard to its entrance into the private domain is a completely fabricated myth. But because it's legal, it's legalistic, and it is, built by the law. We believe that it's not made by people. It's not able to be undone. That's just the way things are. But in reality, that's a complete fabrication. And our Constitution was set up the same way. Our system was set up to where people cannot really infiltrate. People cannot really get things done unless they are part of the institutions, unless they are part of the elite. And so the only real chance you have to make change in this country is to have a very, very wide popular movement that brings in people from both the left and the right, from all races, from all genders. That's really the only way that it's possible. And if you look at any time that change has come about, there have been diverse coalitions pushing hard against the system for change. Nick's movement is not that, and it could never be that. And so Nick's movement falls because, number one, it attempts to do something which is already very difficult and which requires a lot of numbers, and it attempts to do it with a limited coalition of people. It's not possible. Change as he hopes for is not possible. The only way that he could get to the world in which he wants is for the collapse of the current regime, for the collapse of the current institutions, for a complete rehaul of the American political system. And, since the Nazis and the communists weren't able to do it, I'm not really that concerned about Nick doing it. And you'll see in this podcast, he actually goes on to say that that's why he kind of believes he's kind of an accelerationist. He hopes that things get bad. And the reason he hopes for that is because that's the only way that he could ever bring about change. Because as it stands, as much as people want to complain about, the cost of living, things are pretty good. We live in a world of abundance. And when your biggest complaint is that instead of owning, you rent, that things just aren't that bad. Because, if you go back to, the ancient world, you were impaled by a spear because you got drafted into some war that you had absolutely no say in. So things aren't that bad. And because of that, and because of the way that our system is, and because of Nick's ideology, he really can't bring about change, and I think he knows it. And that's why he advocates for things getting worse. That's his own words, you'll see.
They're almost investigating themselves or like denouncing themselves. There's this chaotic energy to the right that was amplified by Trumpism that was there in 2016 and I think is even more powerful now. And it just on some psychic level, it can actually never govern anything.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of truth to that. And you can even tell in terms of how the Trump movement has completely failed to institutionalize any of its reforms. Mm-hmm. I think that when you look across the board, even these guys like Claremont, let's say, or Doge that came in with all these PayPal mafia people, is any of that going to be around in a couple of years? Is any of that going to be around after Trump leaves office? I don't think so. I think the ball is going to fall back squarely into the lap of the old guard institutions that hung around, maybe that didn't go crazy. And so I think you're right. There is something inherently destructive about Trumpism. It almost seems like, maybe in a roundabout way, they were kind of right about how he, in the end, is going to tank everything, is going to destroy everything. Because you look at where Trump is now, his approval's in the toilet, favorability's in the toilet on all the issues. And what's more, it's not just that it's conspiracy theorists in the government, but it's like a criminal enterprise, which almost no one's talking about, but they're all looting. And that's really what Charlie Kirk was doing. That's really what Turning Point was, is it was like a nonprofit that was hiring contractors that were owned by the board members of the nonprofit. It was just like kind of facilitating. It was just like this graft in the same way that the Trump administration with like Howard Lutnick and Steve Witkoff
And I'll just say real quick, this is my point. I mean, that's what right wingers do. It's self-interested people looting from dumb people.
And David Sachs, these guys are like, it seems to be like criminals. It seems to be all about their personal enrichment. And I think that the Epstein files is a really good example of that. I think this relationship with Netanyahu and Trump is a good example of that. And not least of all because it's, Jewish or Israeli, but because it shows how the state is just being turned inside out and used by these like clearly conflict of interest type people. And I don't know that the Republican Party will survive when Trump does not deliver on anything. In 3 years, what's going to be the excuse? In 2020, you could say, well, we had the pandemic and we need 4 more years to keep America great. But okay, you got your second shot. You fought back. You learned your lesson, whatever. Okay, in 3 years, if we have a bad economy, we're still at war with Russia, if there's not actually measurable results, and all that happened was like rank corruption and disappointment and embarrassment, I don't know that there's going to be a salvageable party. And you'll see that play out in the primary between someone like, you'll see it in the contradictions in someone like Vance, where Vance is going to try to be everything to everybody. And I don't think he's going to be able to, that's not going to hold together. I think that you're going to wind up with somebody maybe like Rubio or DeSantis, or you're going to wind up, in other words, with like a refortified center right, actually. And so, yeah, I tend to agree. I think that the whole thing has been a complete failure, total failure in terms of governance.
Speaking of failure, I can remember throughout my career in paleoconservatism, there was always some guy who would come up and talk about tariffs and trade policy and industrial policy and so on. And to be honest, I found a lot of their arguments quite compelling. This idea that an information economy is great, but we can't get too far down that road. We're going to have a bunch of people running call centers and doing spreadsheets, and no one's going to be really making the real stuff. That's a national security issue. It's just a better job, as opposed to working retail or whatever, go to a factory, a lumber yard, et cetera. And Trump, to his credit, has been.
And look how wrong they were. Like, the fact that we switched to this information-based economy, the fact that we have moved away from, caring about like simple manufacturing and lumber yards is what has led to the development of the most promising technology of the 21st century, which is artificial intelligence. They were just wrong. This notion that we should have been investing in sort of the construction of basic things, it failed. That was stupid. This type of policy in general, which exists in this sort of property cluster of things like protectionism, isolationism, bringing manufacturing back home. This stuff only makes sense in very, very limited circumstances, burgeoning countries, for example. It doesn't make sense for what we are, which is a world empire. We chose the route we did, which is to lead the world, which is to be the world empire. And these sort of policies are contrary to it. And even this notion that you could ever have an economy where you could just build everything at home, it doesn't make any sense. It's not possible to realize. No nation is blessed enough to have everything that it needs within its borders. You will always require external resources to make it work.
Talking about this for probably 30 years, but it's almost like this idea that is legitimate in my mind. Like, I'm sympathetic. I'm not Richard Anani or whatever who's like, embraced full-on neoliberalism. I'm sympathetic towards this idea. And it almost seems like this idea has been ruined for a generation. The rollout was absurd. They're tariffing coffee that we can't even make here. There's no real industrial policy like there was to a degree with the CHIP Act. There's no industrial policy of like, let's not just collect money from importers, but let's actually create an industry by subsidizing it, making it a national priority. It does seem to be like Trump wants to brag about collecting money from tariffs and wants to make deals with other countries. We're going to slap 40% on you. You come give us something. We'll take it down, maybe bring it up. It seems haphazard and about deal making on an almost personal level, where I don't think it's going to accomplish anything. And there's been no evidence. Now, granted, it's just been a year, but there's no evidence that this is actually improving our manufacturing base.
I mean, there's evidence that his, in the first term, that his economic policies failed, and they actually brought about deleterious effects. So, I mean, there's no reason to believe that these ones are going to bode better for us.
Manufacturing continues to decline. And I've actually heard one justification of it of, if you want to build, say, a couch with leather or something like that, you'll bring in the leather, it gets tariffed, you put it on a couch. It's a few step process. If you're going to build a car or a computer, this is something that includes thousands of moving parts. Do you want to tariff each and every one of those things as they come in and build it here? No, you want to build it out there and then just tariff it once. It's, if anything.
And you see right there, he basically admits that the goal, which is to sort of protect yourself against becoming too dependent on external sources, isn't even solved by this approach, because even like you just said, you're going to still be getting the components from elsewhere and just building it here. Okay, so if we get into some like global war, they're not going to give us the stuff to build it. So it doesn't matter if we have the manufacturing plants here. We don't have the stuff. So it doesn't even make sense. It doesn't make sense on an economic level. It also doesn't make sense on this sort of, preparing for the worst kind of, under this preparing for the worst kind of theory. And also, that's just not like, do you live your life like building nuclear bunkers, or do you live your life like pursuing wealth and success? Because that makes more sense than preparing against a catastrophe for which you can never properly defend yourself against because things are unexpected. There's no reason that we as a nation should be making our policy on the basis of sort of the worst case scenario. We should be growing our economy. We should be becoming stronger because that's the thing that leads to sort of unexpected technological developments like artificial intelligence, which will prove to be the most important technological development in the history of humankind.
Just simpler. So there seems to be no rationale to give Trump the benefit of the doubt. Maybe he wants an America of manufacturing, tariffs, and unions even, and coal miners and whatever, in some dreamy vision of his childhood. But if there's no policy, you sort of destroy the idea in a way. Because if the AI investment bonanza is what is promoting the stock market, it's how the economy is limping on. If that pops and stuff is just more expensive, then these ideas, which again, I'm sympathetic towards the ideas, maybe less so now, but these ideas are going to be ruined forever by this man. And I think actually that is sad.
Yeah, well, it's funny because the whole justification for Trump, in spite of the things he was saying last year, which were really shocking, the green cards and diplomas and bombing on and all that, and even the disappointments this year, what you always hear from the other side is, well, it's not perfect. Well, let's not make perfect the enemy of the good. Well, it's better than the alternative. And that carries with it the assumption that something is always better than nothing. And that's just not true. Like, I don't think that even, maybe it's counterintuitive, but I don't even think it's logical. Sometimes nothing is better than something because, like you said, the way that the tariffs have been carried out, it's like everything else. It's totally incompetent, totally disorganized. It's sloppy. It seems like it's more aimed at satisfying the approval ratings, checking off a box than it is actually about a serious transformation of the economy. Because that's really what this entails. If you're going to turn into a mercantilist or a protectionist economy, you're totally changing the structure of what America's economy is.
And you're also tanking our global position. The notion that that would be good for the country is just insane. But I mean, what is new about that? Nick wants to completely tank our global position. That's why he wants to curtail or completely stop, he wants to completely stop, rather, immigration, which would completely destabilize our economy and give rise to more expensive goods, a weakening global position, which would lead to other countries pursuing and successfully displacing ourselves from the global preeminent position that we found ourselves in. And we would go the same route as Japan, wherein we would just completely shrink. We would stop growing. This notion that anything like he's describing would actually be good for us is completely false, and it's based on mere speculation, not even like economic reasoning. He himself has actually admitted, by the way, that the economy would go down. He just thinks eventually it would go back up when, I guess, all the white babies are born. It's stupid, it's nonsense, it's idealism. And I mean, what's new? Liberals have always had to fight against idealistic nonsense philosophies about Aryan super soldiers and communist utopias, and maybe people will never learn, but at least we are dealing with a philosophy that can actually instantiate itself.
Mix, going from like 10% productive sector to 25%, having an economy dominated by finance, insurance, and real estate to actual manufacturing. That would involve like a wholesale change, tariffs, subsidies, a new tariff schedule, and that would actually be education,
educating of workers. Where do you think a high school graduate now can go to build a microchip?
Yeah, exactly. All of it. And instead of having legislation or an actual technocratic approach to this sort of thing, experts coming in, you just have this ad hoc, haphazard, like you said, kind of throwing it together. And it's having the reverse effect because it's too unpredictable. People don't want to make long-term decisions. Okay, maybe it's competitive now to build a plant in America, but what are the tariffs going to be in 3 months or 5 months? If you've made hundreds of changes to the tariff program in a few months, people are just going to sit on their money and not invest. And that's not helping these other problems in the economy, the stagflation situation. So you're right. And what's going to happen is if or when this doesn't work out, this will be scapegoated and blamed. And people will say, remember the tariffs that wrecked the economy? Remember, we tried that, it didn't work. And then it's almost like it would have been better if we never tried it at all than if we tried it and did it the wrong way. And then we get blamed for it. And I feel that way about the whole enterprise, actually, about the whole thing, because it's like Trump represents not just that, but also the nativist agenda, the isolationism, or America first, whatever, all these different policies. If it's a failure, we all go down with the ship, and it actually just fortifies that center-left liberalism. And everybody goes back to this like not woke leftism, not woke center-left liberalism, this abundance stuff, this Ezra Klein idea, maybe like a Richard Hanania, Ezra Klein ideology. And people say, we want to go back to when things were sane. And it gives me, it's sort of like cyclical. It's like people voted for Trump to get it out of their system. Then they said, let's go back to normal. Then they voted for Trump again to get it out of their system. Too messy. We're exhausted. Let's go back. And then it's over. So I agree with you.
Yeah. Do you think transformative change is really possible? I mean, it's sort of depressing to ask this question because with
I'll say this, the notion that, like, real empirical failures, will lead to a rejection of the current right-wing regime rest upon the Jesus, I cannot talk right now. Rest upon the assumption that, like, right-wingers are rational. They're not. They don't respond to, like, empirical points. And so, like, the sort of rejection of Trump and the repudiation of him in the 2020 election was not a right-wing thing, it was a left-wing thing. Right-wingers don't have to worry about losing their base because all they have to do is come out and say immigrants are bad and they're taking your stuff, and if it weren't for Indians and Mexicans, you would be running the world like your grandpa, who was a truck driver, did. Don't worry. They have a firm grip on their idiots, and I think they always will, as long as they give them the newest and brightest colored helmets that they can find.
People like you and I, we can talk about policy or horse race politics or whatever, but I think we're after something radical in terms of, and I sometimes wonder whether anyone could really be in the driver's seat of this car. I mean, like, even woke failed to fundamentally transform America. Communist.
A few things. Number one, that's not true. Woke didn't fail to fundamentally transform America. You now have, like, gay people all over the Republican Party. You have, like, when you have gay Republicans, you can't say that wokeness failed. It just went too far. And because it went too far, the sort of, unsightly appendage of wokeism was stripped off. It doesn't mean that the movement failed. It certainly did more than any right-wing movement has done to change the culture and lead to acceptance of, their beliefs. But also, when he says that no one can drive this car and radical change isn't possible, on some level he's right, but on another level he's incorrect, because this rests upon the presupposition that no one is in the driver's seat. Obviously no one person is in the driver's seat, but as I've said, there is a large majority of competent, more left-wing individuals. These are the scientists, these are the lawyers, these are the bureaucrats, these are the institutionalists. And I mean, the institution isn't autonomous. Let's not fictionalize it. It is a projection of people. But the reason why change isn't possible for their side is, again, it's not because this thing could never have a driver. It's because their kinds of people will never be qualified. They'll never have the license, so to speak, to drive the machine. They never will enter the elite institutions, which are the pipeline for success in our modern society. They don't have the ability. And so, in a sense, he's right that their kind of change isn't possible, but he's wrong that no kind of change is possible. We've experienced a lot of change. It just seems to be that over time, the change moves to the left because those are the people who are able to get in the positions where they can bring about the change.
Are some less relevant than we are in some ways. I mean, they're yapping on TikTok complaining about shit. There's nothing going in that direction. I wonder, like, how do you think transformative change is possible, or is it always like this, that in order to get elected, you have a man like Trump because he's a household name and weirdly charismatic and wildly popular and so on, and it just turns into this point where you almost wish it had never happened because it kind of destroys the dream. Like the Soviet Union ruined communism, not so much that it failed, but that it existed at all. Because the dream of a scientific egalitarian society is almost more powerful when it's not implemented, if you understand what I'm saying. And it does seem like transformative change from a right-wing direction, I don't know, maybe, is it, if you would it be better for this never to have happened? It's just kind of crazy to say this, but I think you understand my drift.
I do. And, it reminds me of a conversation I had with somebody. We've got, there are some people on our side that really believe that the solution to everything is we need to have like a whites only town, and like all the white people need it. And I think about ideas like that, and I think, or even for that matter, traditional Christians, they say we need to go back to the way things were, the primitivists. They say we need to go back and have an ancestral diet. And
right.
You look at all these things, and there's just so much strain involved. There's such an effort to resist modernity, which is erasing race and tradition and superstition / religion and all this kind of stuff. And you say, if that's going to be the path of the most resistance, are we just fighting gravity? Like, are we fighting a completely losing battle? Because I think about even my life.
And that is, by the way, the point that I've been making, which is that, like, conservatism itself is fighting gravity. It's an attempt to fight against a fundamental force of nature. And that's why it simply cannot win, ever.
And I think I live in a diverse city, and I prefer it. I'd rather live in a diverse city than live in, like, the trad Catholic commune in Coeur d'Alene.
I like that. I like this because he's admitting that the products of liberalism are good. He wants to live in the diversity. He wants to live in the world empire. He wants to live in the liberal society. He just thinks he can do it better. Well, I mean, okay, we'll see. But one little sort of like I don't know what to call it, heuristic maybe, that we can use to kind of know that conservatism can never win is what is conservatism? It's fundamentally reactionary. Can there be a reaction to something which doesn't exist? No. And so if that is the case, then the sort of perennialism, there's sort of the perennial nature of conservatism means that there is always progress, and if there's always progress, then it's a fundamental force. And if they're trying to fight against a fundamental force, they're fighting a losing battle. And so I think that even just sort of linguistically, logically, you can kind of realize that conservatism is basically doomed from the start. Progress will always take place.
The Tradcath city in Kansas, or the whites only town where
I think you would be a little bored at Back to the Land. Like the third time there was bagpipe music and on Friday night, and I think you might be.
Yeah, I mean, that's true. No one wants to live in the return to the land thing. I had some guy on Twitter, I saw Arvol, I think is his name. He tweeted some stupid like pseudo intellectual thing, and I retweeted and said like the right's greatest intellectual, and someone was like, did your application get denied? And it's like, dude, no one wants to live there. Only losers want to live. Like, I actually am from, not to dox myself, an area around where there is one of these return to the land things. And actually my someone I know saw Arvol at a Walmart, and it's like I left that area. No, I don't want to be there. Trust me, I don't. And I really don't think anyone does. I mean, I saw on Twitter they're building like a rock wall. And I was reading the replies and I was astonished at the level of LARPing in the comments. People were like, you need to build a ditch, and then because that'll stop people from putting ladders. And you also need radio disrupting technology to stop drones that are going to be coming at you. And it's just like, dude, you're insane. Like, you think you're in like medieval England where people are going to become like trying to jump over your fence, or you're going to have, Jews flying drones into your, irrelevant trailer park. It just doesn't make any. Why do you think you're so important? I don't get it.
Running away back to Park Slope, Brooklyn, or something. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and there's like a boredom, because I know there were some people from DC after Trump lost in 2020. They all fucked off to like Wyoming, and they did the whole LARP off the grid, and they all wanted to kill themselves. They were all calling their friends in DC, hey, how's it going? What's going on? What's new? Because they were bored. And it's like, at the end of the day, we have to grapple with the fact people like the way things are. People are going to complain and bitch, and they'll talk about, I want to be a part of something bigger. People kind of actually like the way things are a lot, and you can see it in their behavior. And I would say, maybe just to kind of finish it off, I would say there is an extraordinary amount of potential energy, I think, in society, especially with all these changes, with the world order changing, the economy changing, even things like the pandemic. I do believe that radical change is possible. It's arguable whether it's sustainable. If you can have a revolution. Can you fundamentally change things? Maybe that's another question. But I do think there's a lot of potential energy. It could have been unlocked. I believe that. I still think there's.
If change isn't permanent, then I mean, it's not change. That just goes to show that like this is just like. It's like an explosion. Just because there's an explosion doesn't mean that is part of the nature of the land is still there, right? And so liberalism is like the land. You can make an explosion on it, but liberalism was there before and it'll be there after. It sort of reminds me of Wallen's theory of inverted totalitarianism, wherein he highlights the sort of adaptive nature of liberalism. One of the things that makes it so strong, which he's actually a critic of liberalism, and he highlights that liberals, after their sort of conflict with the authoritarian regimes of the 20th century, adopted some of the measures that the totalitarian regimes took, some of the things that worked, and they adopted them, but they sort of inverted them. And so liberalism, in a way, absorbed the totalitarian aspects that were good and have effectively used them to sort of depoliticize and immobilize the population. Because remember, the goal of liberalism is kind of always to have elite-led governance, which requires a stymied population, which can never really be activated. That's why liberals are very scared of demagogues. Whenever you can read The Rhetorical Presidency by Jeffrey K. Toulis, wherein he talks about how one of the biggest fears of the founders was the sort of eloquent demagogue who could arouse the people who act as a sort of battery for political change. But So this sort of adaptability of liberalism and its ability to sort of experience these shocks and remain is actually a strength of liberalism. And he's right to mention it. And because of that, to talk about temporary change is basically to admit that what we have is it. And we won't have long-term change, again, without the complete destruction of things as they are, without a creation of a completely different order and a new society and a new nation and a new country, which is like, if that's your goal, I mean, go ahead and try, I guess, you know.
Window to do it, but you just need people that are political animals, not, you know, marketing people like Trump.
Yeah, let me dig deeper on this. I mean, I just to use a sort of funny example on this, I went to a Cub Scout camping thing, and the idea there is off the grid. Like, don't look at your phone. Like, we got, you know, some water here. And within a day, someone had already gone, like, driven out of the park to go to a convenience store and checked their phone. Or it's sort of, I feel like that's a kind of metaphor for the way we live, as you say. And America was given this amazing gift it was given a gift from the very beginning in terms of natural resources and just open land. You can just go out there and forge your dreams. And it's dramatically the frontier. It's dramatically different than, say, oppression in the 18th or 19th century, where you're like, we got to fight off the French and, you know, all that, the Russians, all that kind of stuff. And it was just open wide there. And then we were given this other gift after the Second World War, where we came in late. You know, we were on the sidelines for a while, helping the Soviets, but we were on the sidelines for a while. And then finally we sacrificed a few 100,000 and blew Germany to smithereens. There's no competitor. And the former paradigm-making world power, the British Empire, they're broke. So now we're in charge. We're the world's reserve currency. We can just print it and people buy it. It's almost like we were given this amazing gift. And I think one aspect of the right wing is that we're always sort of challenging this thing that does seem to be ineluctable and at the very least extremely attractive. You know, don't go to the luxury mall. You know, and all that diversity stuff. Keep in mind, like, yeah, you can talk about black test scores or crime or whatever. Cities are better than they were in recent memory. All of that diversity stuff has also coincided with a lot of pretty amazing advances and consumables and luxuries and so on. Now, it's a coincidence, but I feel like in people's...
You know, they make good points, but then they say stuff like that, like it's a coincidence. In other words, he's asserting a correlative, not causative relationship between the growing diversity of America and the abundance that we experience and then the growth of these luxuries and good things that we have. That's just simply, I mean, that's disprovable easily. For example, the influx of immigrants, whether legal or illegal, has led to increased safety and lower crime rates. That was one of the things that he used. He said that cities are safer now than ever. That right there is a causative relationship between growing diversity and safety. Whenever you bring in a bunch of immigrants, things get safer. You look at the cities that are like most Latino, like El Paso, one of the safest cities in the country for its size. You look at, you know, for legal immigrants, heavily Asian cities in like California, extremely low crime rates. And so, I mean, there is a causative relationship right there. And we obviously know that the material growth of America and prosperity that we experienced is also causatively related with the increasing diversity. You look at immigrants, universities that bring in more foreign students and immigrants actually apply for and receive more patents. You know, I've said all these statistics before, but the fact that these are directly related to growing diversity through foreign students, through increased immigration, shows that there is a causative and not merely correlative relationship.
There's almost a cause. This isn't the Soviet Union where we pretend to work and they pretend to pay us and it's all gray and drab. It's not that at all. The ability for me to walk 5 minutes to a grocery store and buy just incredible amount of stuff that I don't need. I mean, we live in this sort of paradise. Now, it is hollow. And it is sort of unsatisfying and it's depressing and nihilistic, but it's almost like you can't resist it. And I didn't even think that we were going to be talking about this, but I'm almost at this point of like capitalist realism. Like there's no way out. There's no resisting this. And I think for you and for I, who want something radically different, we've got cool ideas, but we're going up against a supermarket of infinitely cheap luxury goods. And it's almost like it can never really work. It's very depressing. I didn't think we'd be talking about this. This is sort of where my mind has gone. It's the triumph of the American empire. And we sense that it's hollow and we sense that it's more precarious than it ever has been. But there's no way to look beyond it. I don't think the left has a solution. The left, they did woke and that was sort of radical in its way. They got rid of that. Now it's just bad. 1997 liberalism or something. There's almost like there's no way out, in the way that in the 20th century, there really were ways out. There was an idea, there was a philosophy of fascism, in many ways a reaction to communism. There was a radical ideology in communism that people genuinely thought was just sweeping the world. Like, this is going to be in London next. This is going to be in Milwaukee at something. The red flag over Ohio is sort of the idea. Now we're at this point where everyone's unhappy, but there's no real utopian vision out of it. From us, maybe even. And
one thing you have to realize is that the development of liberalism has largely been heralded by a few countries. You speak about these countries that experience these alternative philosophies, you could say, but the only way there would be alternatives is if they came about in a society that was already liberal in the sense that we are. We saw that when we went up against the communists, when we went up against the Nazis, not only did liberalism defeat the alternatives, but the alternatives were eradicated and replaced with more liberal regimes in those countries. And so maybe they're not alternatives, maybe they were like precursors to what we have now. And if that is the case, then to speak of them as alternatives is erroneous.
Even from the left.
Yeah,
think about what you will.
No, I feel exactly that. I've been feeling exactly the same way. And, you know, even the racialism seems very low energy. We hear from these people like immigration. And it's like, yeah, I don't know. I mean, if you have to convince people to care about it, I mean, what do you do when you confront a Gen Alpha, a Gen Z guy, and you say, you need to marry a white person and have white kids, and they go, I don't care about my race. Like, I don't care about that. Like, what do you tell them? Yeah. Well, here's why. Because of, you know, what happened 500 years ago, they're going to say, yeah, like, I have an apartment with my Hispanic girlfriend, and we go to work, and we watch Disney Plus, and we're happy as a clam. It's like, okay, well, you know, checkmate. We're all going to get together as like the chuddies and glasses, and we're going to say, no, but it needs to only be white people in this area, except for when you drive 15 minutes out there or whatever. I agree. I guess I would say, if what we are saying is true, or what we have been saying is true, the kind of like diagnostics that give you industrial policy or that give you race realism is that it's sort of an acknowledgement that maybe 1990s liberalism is utopia, but that it is going to eventually go away because of, like, for example, you pointed out the reserve currency. There is not an inexhaustible appetite for American debt, as it turns out. And we can't actually have an economy that only makes ideas or provides services. And, you know, with these people that we're importing, things are sort of trudging along, but you're starting to see signs of weaknesses. You know, for example, like these airplanes that are falling out of the sky. Is that DEI? I mean, maybe that's ridiculous, but maybe.
Yeah, it is ridiculous. And this right here is the most telling part of the podcast because, one, he says maybe 1990s liberalism is utopia. Okay, maybe. And then his evidence that things are sort of failing now is that some planes fell out of the sky, and then he says maybe it's DEI. This is nonsense. And this is why serious people are not on this side. That was not some rigorous analysis wherein he traces the development of these ideas and then runs some empirical tests to see if things are really holding up and staying true to maybe the original precepts, or maybe there's been some change along. This was just pure speculation based on like something that only someone who shares your retarded presuppositions, which like one is that like DEI is leading to all of these problems, and only someone who shares those presuppositions and has absolutely no ability to discern the truth of your statements would say like, oh, that's true. I mean, let's be honest. They've been saying that liberalism was going to go away forever. At least, you know, not forever, as long as liberalism has been around. And it hasn't happened. They've been saying the West is going to fall. It hasn't happened. They've been saying, well, you know, the USSR was going to replace it. What happened to them? Oh, Nazi Germany. Well, what happened to them? China's going crazy. They recovered far worse than we did after the pandemic. Japan was the big thing in the late 20th century. Well, look at them. Eventually, I hope people are going to realize that these calls for disaster are nothing but, you know, fear-mongering. It's the same thing that people said, oh, the immigrants are going to destroy everything. It hasn't happened yet. And they said it with every single wave. And that's really what Nick is he just completely, you know, sounds the alarms or everything. Oh, they bombed, you know, we're going to be going, this is World War III. And well, he was wrong about that prediction. I don't know. Things are going along fine. Sustainability is an issue for every single political philosophy, liberalism included. But the notion that we're like on the verge of running out is just not true. There is a nearly, as it stands, inexhaustible and growing supply of human capital that can, you know, for lack of better words, be used as fuel for the development and growth of liberal empires. And that's the function that immigration has served for centuries now. And it'll continue to serve that end. And liberalism, by the way, has given rise to the development of AI. a Western liberal phenomenon, and other countries are now pursuing it, but we're the ones who developed it in the mid-20th century in the labs of, Cornell originally is where, neural nets were theorized, which formed the basis of modern AI. Sorry about that. We had, towards the end of the 20th century, the development of modern AI and the abandonment of GoFi, which was symbolic AI, which is no longer really used. And this maybe promises to get rid of the problem of scarcity. If there is a solution to these perennial problems that plague us, maybe it's AI. And guess what? The only political philosophy that has instantiated the development of a technology like AI was ours. And other people bid it, but that doesn't mean that they developed it. And their systems, which are closed off, are not going to be as conducive to the development of AI, which could actually lead to something like AGI. So, this, warning, things are unsustainable. It's just kind of nonsense. Speculation. But that's all he has.
Maybe it's financialization, but it's sort of like, it's the same issue. It's like, because the whole premise of globalization is you globalize the economy with free trade and you send all the jobs overseas. You globalize the population with mass migration. You import all the people. And I guess the question is just whether that's sustainable. And to me, that was always I always used to say that America first or nationalism it's just eventually going to happen because you're going to start to see society crack up. And I think that, the strength of that prediction.
And this is how you know Nick doesn't really know anything. The notion that society cracking up is bad for liberalism evinces a fundamental misunderstanding of the liberal and American project. Again, I cited it already, but Federalist Paper number 10 highlights the strengths of a society wherein factions are allowed to be numerous but not large, which is just another way of saying a very split up society. That was their goal. Their goal was for society to split up. It means that it's controllable. It means that no one can grow too large. No one can influence the way that things are. So, he just doesn't understand political philosophy. He hasn't read any of this stuff. He doesn't know anything.
The answer lies in that, whether that's going to happen or not. Can they corral these like militant Hispanics and the Indians into that 90s liberalism? Are they going to dutifully go to work? Can we bring enough factories back or, send them to the right? Can we friendshore them to the right countries and still keep printing money? I guess that's a question because a lot of people would say all that stuff, the luxury mall, it's going to crack up in the face of, the demographic tipping point. And then, multipolarity, it's going to open up these other options where people are not going to buy.
Give me a break. The demographic tipping point, a lot of the people we're importing are more productive than white Americans. Just look at their income, look at the positions that they hold, look at the jobs that they hold, look at the rate of masters, of JDs, of MDs, of PhDs. It's higher in their population. So, if anything, we're importing a more skilled population. What are you talking about?
Our money, or people don't have confidence in our money or in our governance. And then that's where I say there's still potential energy. Things still might get exciting. There might be some potential for renewal. Maybe, and I guess that makes me an accelerationist. To me, that's kind of like the fundamental question is like maybe things need to get very bad before they can get better because something needs to stand in the way between people and Disney Plus for them to maybe be roused to change things or, change the regime. And that's going to be maybe complete anarchy or a war or something.
I agree. I think something needs to get between me and Disney Plus, in fact, because it is quite attractive. Just watching the second season of Severance last night, that's really good stuff. Do you think that Donald Trump is an accelerationist in these terms? Now, what I mean by accelerationism here is the worse the better. It's not like Leninist acceleration. I know there's a kind of tech acceleration towards a post-human future, which I find disgusting and ridiculous, both things. But I'm talking about the Leninist accelerationism because what I was talking about before of this seemingly inevitable, ineluctable, attractive American empire is all built on the bones of the Second World War. And maybe to a lesser degree, the fall of the Soviet Union in the late 80s and 90s. It's built on geopolitics. And politics comes first. Violence comes first before you have an economy. There is no free trade. The libertarian notion that if we just got rid of the guns that everyone would trade with, that's the exact opposite. In fact, free trade is a military political project. And it's not going to exist without policing the waterways and airways and all that kind of stuff. So I guess why I'm asking the question is Trump an accelerationist? In the sense that nationalism itself is not really what we're about. And I'll expand a little bit on this degree. I wonder the degree to which America has ever been a nation. And there's this famous dialectic, it's the Frederick Jackson Turner thesis. If you'd stayed at BU, you would have read this book perhaps, but it's a really simple concept. The word frontier in the United States means wide open space. Go out to Montana and make your dreams come true. The word frontier and Grenze in German, frontier in French, it means border. And those are the exact opposite things. So in a European context, you had amassed armies that were confronting another power. In the United States, you had just like, it's like Tron, just, this like wide open expanse that you can make of what you will. And he thought the closing of the frontier was actually going to radically shift the American mind. Why I mention this is that we think in terms of nationalism, like we're a people and we have these traditions. Well, do we? Like those people who came over on the Mayflower were, in my opinion, weirdos, to be honest. They felt that the Anglican Church was heretical or some crazy. I mean, they were just too intense for their own good. And they're the sort of if we have a founding myth, it's them, the Pilgrims and Thanksgiving, all that kind of stuff. And we had other people come here for over the course of the 19th century where it's like, you're welcome, go for it. It's wide open. That is tell that to a Prussian officer. Like anyone can come into your country and have the Prussian dream or whatever. They would find that totally ridiculous. We've always been an empire, and
he is right here. I mean, this notion that we are a nation in the sense of a people with a common ancestry and we're, it's not true. And it's extremely simplistic, and it evinces the fact that you have never read any American history if you think that this is a white nation, this is a nation of people with a common ancestry. No, it's not. It's not. A lot of people went to the 1791 Naturalization Act. That's just stupid. 70,000 Mexicans were naturalized under that act. That wasn't an act that, in practice, acted in the manner that the words on the paper said that it should. And it's because, like Richard is pointing out here, we've never been a nation. We've never been based on this notion of being only white. We've never been based on this notion of being only British or only German. We have been a land which has been settled by waves of people who have been who have adopted this sort of idea. We are, as they say, a propositional nation. And so, yeah, in the traditional sense, we're not a nation, but we are a propositional nation, which is a growing and novel phenomenon. But I mean, nations themselves, and the way that we understand them, were also new at one point in time. It's not like people have always conceptualized themselves as nations. Empire seems to be more the natural state of things. And you could call a propositional nation an empire. They're pretty related. And so, I think that he is right here, though, in the sense that, like, nationalism, American nationalism, is basically oxymoronic. It doesn't make sense.
American nationalism is perhaps a contradiction in terms. And at the very least, not that Trump fulfills all of these promises, but the notion of we're just going to put America first, or as Matt Walsh said, America only. This actually is in contradiction to our traditions. The liberals are right about many things. We are an empire in all these crazy ways. We are just this landmass that never ends, very similar to Russia, or we are a global empire in which nothing is going to hold back our corporations and our ambition to make money. And in going against those things, however incompetently he's gone against them, but in talking about tariffs and talking about...
it's been going for a while. And I think we'll end it on the high note. We'll end it on him saying that the liberals are right. No, but seriously, I mean, if you get the chance, go ahead and watch this full podcast, because I think that it's great. I think that, it doesn't take a genius to realize that the right is basically just inept, that they'll never be able to actualize the things that they wish for, and that their side is kind of doomed, and that, yeah, as Richard says, the liberals are right. So if you're on their side, you better jump ship while you can, because it's sinking. But don't worry, it'll be back with more nonsense in a few years. So you can hop on the train whenever they're saying, instead of, what was it? They used to say like Obama was a lizard or something. Maybe they'll be saying that the next Democratic president is a donkey or something. I don't know. Who knows? It gets crazier every year. You can't really predict it. But hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, be sure to leave a like, subscribe. Again, I'm always open to debate. My socials are in the description. And yeah, see ya.